Bridging Gaps, the business podcast with Deborah Levitt, sharing the challenges and stories of fellow business owners. In this episode of Bridging Gaps, the business podcast, during the interview with Andrew Priestley, we encountered some technical difficulties. As a result, at about the 35-minute point, you may notice the conversation is a bit disjointed as Andrew and I restart after resolving the issues. Hello and welcome to Bridging Gaps, the business podcast. Today I have with me Andrew Priestley, who is a business leadership coach. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, hi, how are you, Deborah?
I am good, thank you very much. How are you?
Good. I'm excited about this.
So am I, actually.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
So, Andrew, as I mentioned, you're a business leadership coach, and I know you from the work that you do through Dent, but I know you do a lot of other coaching and work with a lot of different people as well. So I was wondering if you could tell us, a little bit about yourself and who you work with in terms of your coaching.
Yeah, sure. So, the short version is that I'm a business leadership coach. I specialize in working with managing directors of limited companies. Okay, so it's usually at that leadership level. And invariably, they will have probably turnovers of about 300,000 up to about, say, 4 million. And they probably employ somewhere between 3 and 30. Well, actually, it's between about 12 and 30 staff. Okay. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to increase their revenues. They're trying to be more profitable. But I think they're sort of at a stage too where they're trying to grow the business. And growing a business is one of the things that most people want to do when they get to that level of turnover. They have to do that. They've got to grow the business, otherwise the business goes backwards. So they're looking to do that. And a big part of that is really about the person who actually runs the business. It's the mindset of that leader. And a lot of my clients have actually come up on a journey of a small business of they know the technical work and they've been doing the operational work, but invariably they haven't really had any formal leadership training or management training. And what tends to happen is that they basically, the business sort of, if you like, stalls at the level of their knowledge and their skill set, right? And they actually become the handbrake to the business. But the business is saying, we're growing, we want you to do more things. And they then say, well, what do I do next? So my qualifications are in industrial organizational psychology. I profile my clients before we start because I'm really looking at what are you doing that's either going to work for the business or hold it back. And I also look at the technical aspects from an accounting perspective and also from a business development perspective and put those three things together. And from that, we then design a program. Typically, I'll do a 3-month accountability program with people. And a typical outcome of working with a client probably over a 12-month period is they get somewhere between a 30 and a 400% uplift in performance. So, yeah. So, I don't know. How does that sound?
I think that I would be happy with 30 or 400% and anything in between.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
What types of things do you find? So I'm just wondering when you're saying that the person has, reached kind of the extent of their knowledge and their skills in terms of the technical side, and the business needs more to grow. Are they holding it back because they don't know how to grow any further? Or is there also a resistance, almost a fear that if they bring other people in who have other knowledge and expertise, that it will minimize their role?
It's a really good observation. If I had to say anything, I would probably say that when you start a business, people say it's my baby. They tend to say it's my baby. My business is my baby. And it's a little bit, when you get to it, there's a point when you reach in your business where you physically and mentally just cannot do everything. You've got to bring other people into it. If you've grown your team from, say, 3 people up to, say, 30 people, you literally can't do everything, and you've got to actually let go of some things, and that's where it locks up. Just to give you some context, if you're listening to the podcast, you do this research yourself, but if you go on to the Houses of Commons, and if you look up business statistics, you can actually see what has been happening in any 18-month cycle in the UK in terms of business. So what the current statistics tell us is there's about 5.5 million businesses. Around 75% of those businesses turn over under 300,000. Okay, And interestingly, 80% of those turn over less than 85,000. So we've got a lot of businesses in the UK that are actually turning over less than 85,000, which is, as you know, is the VAT threshold. You've got around about 20% who turn over between 300,000 and 2 million. And then I think it diminishes. I think there's about 4% of businesses turn over somewhere between 2 and 10 million and so on, down to about 0.1% who turn over greater than 50 million in this country. So most of the clients that I work with, they're sort of in that space of at least, say, between, say, 55,000 up to about 300,000, which I would say is probably that startup mode that you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a point where you've stabilized. Think of it like this: you go through a journey where you stabilize your revenues. In other words, you've learned how to actually go out and find clients and customers on a consistent basis. And secondly, you've learned how to make your business profitable, so you can do that profitably. And now you're looking to grow the business in some shape or form. And obviously, if you're taking people on, that's what happens. So there's a point where you clip over that 300,000 turnover, which is a really unique set for the UK particularly, where it's a great business once you clip over 300,000, but it means that you switch from being a technical hands-on person to more of a, you've got, if you own the business, if you're the managing director of that limited company, you've got to switch over from being very technically orientated to more strategically orientated. But I'm also interested in people who have come out of, say, corporate life, or they've come out of a work life, and they decide that they want to start their own business, which I think is the area that you're focused on, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I'm mainly working with people who are starting their own business, who have decided to leave it, to do what they are an expert at, and who are then finding it really difficult to actually achieve what they need to achieve, because when we're in that corporate environment, we have all of this support around us, which we actually quite often are fighting against. We're finding it really limiting. But when you've left it and it's no longer there, you realize just how much it supported you. And so people then can get very overwhelmed with all of the different roles and hats that they have to put on and lose sight of what their real priorities are.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, what happens is that when you start your own business, you're good at doing one or two really good things and really bad at doing a lot of things. And a business asks you to do a lot of things, and that's the challenge that you run into. So I guess if I was talking to startups and I'm sort of listening to what they're saying to me, and I do work with a lot of startups, as you know, I mean, the Threshold program that we run is to help people, if you like, crash through the 85,000 pound VAT barrier. That's why it's called threshold. That's when HMRC looks at you and says, well, we believe that if you do 85,000 in turnover, you're adding value as a business. That's why I call it value added, I guess, value added tax. We want to tax that value, But if I'm looking at it, typically what I find is that to make life simple for a lot of people, I point out there's really only four things you want to look at in your business. Number one is your marketing and sales. The second one is your management and your administration. Third one is your operations. And that's usually where most people start a business. They start on the operational things, the thing I'm good at. And then the last one, which I think is pretty important, is financial control, where you're asking yourself, is my business washing its face, for example? Yeah.
And do you find, so I've come across people who are almost scared of the VAT threshold and almost want to stay underneath it because they're worried that it's going to change in some way and life's going to become, much more complicated, or something unknown is going to happen. Have you encountered that? And do you have any thoughts on why you shouldn't be scared of it?
Well, firstly, it is just a number. It's an arbitrary number, right? It keeps changing. When I first came to the UK, which was about 10 years ago, it was about 75,000, I think. It's 10 years, it's gone up about 1,000 per year. So it is just a number. It just means that your obligations to the HMRC have slightly changed. And if you've at that level, I would expect anyone who's anyone who's doing over 40,000 turnover, for example, you're at least talking to a bookkeeper or an accountant at that point, right? And in most cases, your accountant can sort out most of the issues that your obligations regarding 85,000. Incidentally, you need to register for VAT if you invoice 85,000 in any 12-month period. So it's not just the April to end of March, April to April cycle. It could be any 12. It could be February to February. It could be June to June. If you invoice over 85,000, you have to register for VAT anyway. Honestly, I think life gets better once you go through the VAT threshold, because basically there's something about a VAT business where you say you must be doing something right to have achieving those sort of revenue levels to start with. I think that's good. So it adds to a little bit of credibility to the business, if you like. There's nothing wrong with not being VAT registered, but it does add to it. And it also means that you can then take on larger clients. You can take on, so a lot of times when you've got a smaller business, there seems to be one of the mindsets that I run into quite often is, if I keep my prices lower, then I'll get more customers, I'll attract more customers, and then that will grow my business. In actual fact, that's probably the worst thing you should do. You can't discount your way to growth, if you know what I mean. And so, actual fact, you'll keep your tax, and I'm not an accountant, but you'll keep your tax obligations a little bit lower, but the business doesn't really grow. That's why we've got so many businesses under the 85,000 threshold. They're worried about what will happen. Is there life after 85,000? Well, I'm here to tell you, when you push your 85, don't go for 85, go for 120, go in for 300,000. You know, business is just a game. You can head for any level you want if you like that. I think you should. I think there's a lot of fun on the other side of 85, put it that way.
And it is interesting how people do put that up as a barrier. And as you say, that they're worried that if they suddenly have to charge extra for the VAT, that they're going to lose customers, because now they're charging more. But as our listeners can't see, Andrew is shaking his head going, no.
Yeah, but see, think of it this way. If you're charging VAT, as a necessity, you start looking for clients who can pay VAT. So your customers slightly change, right? You'll run into resistance if you're working with clients who say, is that with VAT? Well, let me think about it. Well, I would probably say you want to think if you actually want those people as clients, right? But if I'm working with a client and they say, they don't even ask about the VAT because they know they can claim it back.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 It's not really a biggie. Yeah.
No.
And I think, talk to your own accountant, because sometimes when you go through the VAT threshold, and HMRC is not a scary monster at all. Stay on the right side of the HMRC. They're actually pretty good, because they'll actually look at what you're doing in your last 2 years trading and say, you know what, we'll probably take you to a fixed rate of about 14%.
So they're giving you options to go through, which is really good.
Yeah, well, they'll look at the VAT you're collecting and the VAT you're paying, and they might then say, let's just set your rate at about 12% or 14%, depending on what your turnover is. It's not a strict 20-20 all the time. So 20 is the VAT thing, but the HMRC really does look at your trading. And in case you don't know it, at some point, what's happening, HMRC is trying to get us onto quarterly reporting now, so which is why they're getting across to things like QuickBooks and Xero, so that we actually do all our assessments online. So they want to collect the tax quarterly now, not annually. Yeah. So why am I talking about tax? I'm not even an accountant.
I was going to say, shall we move on?
I think so. Yeah.
I think
you lose the will to live when you're talking tax, don't you?
I think it's because we started talking about the threshold, and then we
VAT.
It's
good to think about though, but just aim higher. Just go higher than that. Yeah.
Exactly. So you were saying that when you start with your clients, you do a profile and you look at a number of different aspects. So what sort of things do you find? Are there typical things that you find that your clients all might have in common, and that you generally need to address to help them progress?
Yeah, this is a really good question. That's a good question, because if you go back, when I started doing business coaching, it was probably, I've been doing business consulting for a long, long time, but when I actually started doing business coaching, it was about 1998, and the flavour of the month back then was basically we were reading books like by Jack Welch and Richard Branson and Lee Iacocca and people like that. And basically, the way of coaching someone was to give them a personality bypass. So let's try and make you like Jack Welch or whatever it was. And you've seen like you've seen all these articles, the 5 qualities of effective business owners and all that sort of stuff, the 7 things, the 11 laws, all that stuff, right? Which doesn't have, honestly, it doesn't have much research validity to any of that, right? What we do know, and I when I first started coaching, I was working with team leaders and really senior team leaders who are working in high-end compliance environments like medical and mining and aviation and things like that. And what I found was when someone's under the pump, under pressure, they don't have time to run back to their library and flip through there and go, what would Lee Iacocca do or Jack Welch do? It has to be very intuitive and very natural. And under pressure, people have a default setting, which they will go to. They'll actually naturally just go straight to that default setting. So no matter how hard you've tried to coach them to be like somebody else, it statistically is not a really good way to operate as somebody. So you really want to find out, how do I actually operate under pressure? So I did an industrial organisational psych degree, and one of the majors that I did was on developing diagnostic tools. And the thing that I found was, as a coach, have you ever worked with somebody where you ask them a question and they're telling you an answer to the question, and then your time's up, you've done your hour, and at the end of the hour you say, was there anything else? And I say, oh yeah, there was this issue here, and that's the thing you should have spent the hour on, right? And leaders, particularly when you're working with them, business owners, managing directors, a lot of times they're going to tell you what they want to hear. You don't want to tell somebody, well, I'm not really good at this. So I started looking at diagnostic tools, and we're all familiar with things like DISC, Myers-Briggs and so forth, which are personality. They look at your personality. But personality is not a particularly reliable indicator of how you're going to perform under pressure. So I thought, well, how do we do this? And I looked and looked and looked for a diagnostic tool. How's somebody going to operate under pressure? And believe me, when you're put under pressure, you will go to your default setting, right? And you do have a default setting you go to. So I wanted to know what that was. I couldn't find anything. I used a number of different diagnostic tools, but in the end, I created my own, which is a hybrid it's a hybrid of things like the MMPI and the Hogan and things like that. But basically, there's 400 questions. People answer that, and it really is about business leadership. And I'm not talking about football, like sporting leadership or military leadership or political leadership, but I'm talking about, what do business leaders do? These are people who operate within a commercial environment. And I think most people have been to a talk, like at a breakfast meeting or a keynote, where you've got some sports person who comes in and tells you all those things about how to be. Have you ever been one where a sports person tells you how to run a business, right?
Yeah, they're coming in and giving you all the things that made them successful as a sportsman and saying, apply this to your business.
Yeah, but I hate to tell you this, in case you've noticed, right? There is no half time in business.
Exactly.
There's no quarter time in business. There's no time out on the bench for a breather or anything. It doesn't work like that. And clinically, and if you like, or biologically or neurologically, if you actually did an MRI scan on a sports person and a business person and asked them the same question, different parts of the brain light up. If you give a sports person a business problem, different MRI scan will show different parts of the brain light up to a business person, right? So it's a different way of even thinking, right?
Okay, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. So I focused just on business leadership. And the second thing that I noticed was a lot of leadership profiles cover leadership per se, and I just wanted commercial leadership because I work with business people, right? And secondly, I discovered that most of the tests out there, or the diagnostic tools, they're not written by anyone who's run a business. They're written by academics, right? And I've run companies, and I've hired people, and I've had to come up with payroll, and I've had, you know how it works. When's payday in the UK? It's on a Thursday, isn't it, or something?
I don't actually know, to be honest. I know it's somewhere near the end of the month.
Well, that's right. Well, in Australia, which is where I'm from, okay, originally, payday used to be on a Thursday, either weekly or fortnightly, or the last Thursday in the month, right?
Right.
And I had a business where, if you've employed people, honest to God, they don't care where the money comes from as long as it's there Thursday, right? And you'll hear on Friday morning, excuse me, Andrew, have you got a minute? I just went to my account, and I'm just looking at my account right now, and there's no money in there. I don't care where the money comes from, right?
Well, exactly. They're there, they might be invested in you. They might want the company to be successful, but ultimately they're there to earn money. Yeah. And it's your problem as the company owner to make sure that money is there.
Yeah. So the whole purpose of what I'm saying here is that I profile people. That's what the profile does. It tells me how does this person going to operate as a manager or a leader within their business. And what we know from the research, and there's a lot of research done by a guy called Henry Cloud, who's quite famous in the US, and he's picking up a lot of the research that was done by Harvard into research. And basically, they talk about leaders as having task and relationships. So task is about the ability to get results, and relationships is about the way you work with others. And you'll know people who get a lot done, but kill every relationship that they're in. And you'll know people who've got great relationships, but they don't get much done. Well, good leadership and good management is about that balancing act between those two things. And if you get a picture of a speedboat going down the Thames, for example, with someone water skiing or a boat there, you'll see a wake that goes out behind the boat. Well, leadership is like that task relational wake. That's what gives everyone a nice ride. When you get that wrong, people on your water skiers are getting thrown out into the water and
crashing down.
Yeah, exactly. So sitting underneath those two things of task and relationship, we have 5 competencies, and I won't bore you with that, but sitting under the 5 competencies are 36 traits. And those 36 traits relate to how you effectively run a business, how you actually, and we can see this. These are things that basically predict where you're going to go. So as an example, one of the things that I look at is a thing called attitude. And attitude is a big determinant of how well you'll succeed in a business, right? So, for example, you'll know people who are a glass half empty sort of person and a glass half full. So on this scale, if you like, if I just draw it and show it to you, we have a scale, we have a chart with a scale, and really ideally what we're looking for is not 100%. We're not looking for 100%. We're actually looking for about a 75% mark, right? And this is just bog standard psych testing, for example. We look for about that third quartile, right? And really, what on my chart show? It shows something like this. It'll show a bandwidth plus or minus 5 points on around the 75, so between 70 and 80%, right?
Okay.
And then you get a score on something like attitude. And we're looking, if that bar is inside that purple zone there, that's a good score, keep it up. But if it's a low score, the lower it goes, the more negative and critical the person becomes. And you've worked with people who are at 50%. Everyone's worked with someone on attitude. You know, they're high maintenance. You'll tell them a good idea and they'll immediately tell you why it's not going to work. You've worked with someone like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So with these types of things, Andrew, if you, so somebody who's not quite ready to be one of your clients, do you have any sort of cut down version or a version that somebody could do and say, okay, well, actually, I've realized that my problem is here and I need to do some work on that area?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a cut down version of the leadership profile because it's, you know, it's not we're not the cheapest. We don't try to be, but you know, we're talking about companies who really they're trying to push through a 2 million mark, if you know what I mean. So they really want to invest in that leadership stuff. Having said that, if I'm working with someone who is quite negative in their business, right? And you don't need to take a test to ask yourself, how do I feel about my business? Do I feel optimistic? Am I rehearsing a good future, or do I keep investing in what won't work?
Yeah, that's fair.
You got it. So the lower it goes, the more critical, if you like, and negative you become, as opposed to critiquing and positive. Incidentally, let's say you get someone whose score here is up here at 100%. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to do £1 million this week. You know, it's just not real, right?
Yeah.
So the second thing is, if somebody says, okay, well, that's really nice because I'm a startup. What would work for me? What I've found works really well for startups. So let's actually make this about startups from this point onwards, right? here's something you want to think about. And if you're watching this back, you want to stop the recording right here and ask what your answers might be. But let's say, Deborah, that I said to you, I rang you up and I said, Deborah, we're mates. We're good mates. You know, can you lend me 25 grand, please, for my business?
I'm hanging up now.
What would go through your mind? Let's say that I said, I want to, can you lend me 25 grand for my business? What would you say? What would you ask me?
Yeah, you would immediately want to start thinking about it. You would potentially just want to disengage from it and feel really awkward and find it hard to actually say no to it.
Yeah, and yet the average startup in the UK will churn through 25,000. That's why I've picked that number, right? So if you talk to NatWest and the banking forums, they agree that it's around the 25 grand mark for a small startup. That's what you're looking at investing in your business. So you technically are an investor in your own business, right?
Yes.
So let's look at these points, because I don't want to spend the whole thing on tax or psychology. I want to give you some takeaway value here. So think of it like this. Where do we see, can you lend me 25,000? Where we see that is on a show like Dragon's Den.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
asking for a chunk of money.
You've got it, yeah. So you're going on to Dragon's Den to say to them, I've got this idea for a business and I want a partner and I want cash, right? And the Dragons will ask a whole bunch of questions. And I'll say that, if you watch that show, I would say any startup, go onto Amazon and go onto the DVDs, type in Dragon's Den, and then go down to the used versions, because you can pick up seasons 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for about 40p. Don't buy the brand new ones, buy the second-hand ones and watch them over and over and again. But I'll give you a format for how you can listen to what they're saying, so you totally understand what the Dragons are saying. Because if somebody said to me, can you lend me 25,000? One of my good friends, Dave Robson, is a VC, and we look at business plans from between 2009 and 2013. We were looking at about 60 business plans a month, right? And I watched David, who's a very experienced VC, and he would read one page of the exec summary and then, no. I said, David, what are you looking for? And he would tell me how he was filtering that business plan, right? As a business coach, I do a business strategy with most businesses, and I'm filtering the same information, right? So essentially, I got to hang out with VCs who were telling me how they were thinking about it. And if you watch Dragon's Den, you'll actually see exactly what I'm going to share with you right now, right? This is really, really invaluable. So one of the very first things they often ask, and this is number one, okay, they ask the question, why did you start your business?
Yes.
See, why are you starting your business is a really powerful question. So what I'm going to suggest, okay, is if you actually do these questions in the order that we're talking about, what I'm going to suggest is that I'm not checking my phone. What I'm doing is I suggest that you get your mobile phone and get the voice recorder, okay, and press record and answer the question, why am I starting my business? And just talk to your phone and talk to it for a few minutes. Sometimes talk as long as you want and capture the answers. Then listen back to them, because these are sort of like the BS detectors. You'll pick up things that you missed normally. Okay. The second thing they'll ask is, okay, tell me what your idea is. Okay. So if you're listening to this, draw yourself an 8-star star like this, and then just put the words down. So they'll say, why did you start the idea? What's the idea? The next thing they'll say, actually, I've got to qualify this. The Dragons don't always say what's the order. They don't do it in this order, but I'll give you the order that I've taken it from. The order actually comes from the executive summary of a business plan.
Right.
And here's a tip for anyone watching this. Go on to the Prince's Trust website and type in Prince's Trust business plan, because their template is written for young people. So the language is really, really impeccable to help. It's the most user-friendly business planning template I've ever seen. It's absolutely wonderful. But they're dealing with young entrepreneurs, so it's really good just to dip into that template and just answer questions. So firstly, they'll then ask, okay, who is this for? Who's your customer, right? Then they'll say, who's on your team, and how are you going to market with this? So what's your idea? Who's this for? Who's on your team? And how are you going to market? Right? And then they'll say stuff like, what are you going to sell and how much?
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll ask about return on investment. They'll talk about margins. So really they're asking about the numbers. Does it stack up? What are your numbers, right?
Okay.
So a question I ask a lot of people is, what is your revenue target going to be, right, for this year, right? And just to give you a heads up, let's say that and I work with some employment law firms, and if we employ a junior, which is about the junior wage, the average wage in the UK is 27,600. That's the average, right?
Okay.
Obviously, it's a lot more in city centres, but if you average all of, I think there was some great research that was done, but the average wage is about 27,600, right? And a junior wage is somewhere between 18 and 20. Okay. Now, if I employ a junior, I've got to sell about 3 to 6 times their wage to justify having that $20,000 salary, £20,000 salary. So I've got to earn somewhere between 60 and 120,000 to justify them. If I'm a business partner, right, I've got to do at least 3 times my salary. So if you've got a partner on 60 grand, say, or you want to pay yourself 50 grand and you're the business owner, you've got to do at least 150. Is that the idea? Otherwise you're not taking enough out of the business.
Yeah. And I think
so the numbers have got to stack up. Yeah.
Kind of stuck on thinking about, how much is coming into the business without really thinking how that's going to relate to what they need to take out to live on and what they still need to keep the business running and progressing.
Yeah, so I hate to say it. Let's go back to House of Commons stats again and HMRC and Companies House results again. The way that Companies House and HMRC House of Commons look at it, they look at it in any 18 months period, because when you start a business, let's say you start the business on January 1st, you've got until not October, but the following October to actually submit your first return, right? So based on those numbers, for example, in 2015 to October 2016, there were 608,000 businesses started and 484,000 businesses failed in the same time period, which is around about a 76% failure rate, right? Now, it doesn't tell us anything. It doesn't mean they failed. It could mean that a lot of those businesses just failed to submit a self-assessment because they didn't turn over the taxable threshold.
Okay, so it doesn't mean they've necessarily gone under.
No, it doesn't mean they still might be trading. They're just trading very, very small, right? Because if you under UK law, if you work for yourself, you've got to register for self-employment. Now, you might have a lot of those people, for example, who are earning, say, less than £12,000 a year. Well, they don't have to put in an SA. So that probably accounts for why a lot of them, remember, we've got a lot of people turning over the 80,000 mark, 85,000 mark. So it's probably accounted for the fact they didn't earn enough. But business failures, I guess, they call them, House of Commons calls them business deaths. What a horrible way to look at it. Anyway, so the numbers do have to stack up, right? The numbers have to stack up. And then you've got your business model and then you've got systems. So let's say you go into Dragon's Den. They don't go in this order. They'll say, tell me what your idea is. What do you sell? Okay. How are you going to market with this? Who's this for? Right. Who's on your team? The stuff you're selling, what are the margins that you've got? They jump all around. Okay. So having watched that, I thought, hang on, they're just asking exec summary questions. And the purpose of those 9 categories, why did you start the business? What's the idea for the business? Who's this for? Who's on your team? How are you going to market with this? What are you going to sell? How much? Do the numbers stack up? What's the business model? And have you got systems and processes? They're really just exec summary questions. So I thought, can I plug my book? So to do that, I'm going to do it anyway. So
I was going to ask you about it, but you jumped in there, Andrew.
So to make it easy, I wrote a book called Starting. And basically Starting works on this idea, and this is what I see over and over and over as a business coach, particularly when I'm working with sub 85,000, right, is a lot of people have a good idea and some good reasons for why they want to start the business. Okay, but they don't have a good business for the idea.
Yes.
Right. So that's the sort of the sub idea of my book here is you might have you might have a good idea for a business, but have you got a good business for your idea? And a lot of people say, how does that work? Because if you're looking at the executive summary, the idea is only just one of the things that are going to guarantee success in the business. And the thing about this is you don't need to have an amazing idea. You just need to have picked a viable gap in the market or a viable trend or a viable industry that you're entering. In most cases, entrepreneurs and startups really have just found a gap in the market. Just make sure it's a viable gap. It's minimum viable, that you can make an income out of it, right? So I see a lot of people who've got a great idea for a business, but they don't have a good business. They haven't really addressed these things here. So let's finish up on this idea. The point that I was making was, firstly, that you've got the idea and why have I started this business, and this is the idea for the business. But these are the components which are what's the business behind the idea. And to make that easy for people, I actually put all of that in a book called Starting, which you can get from Amazon. It's a print-on-demand title, so don't be fooled if they say we're out of stock. There's plenty of stock there. That's no drama whatsoever. But you're looking at part 5 of this book. What I'd suggest is, so that you get the most out of it, it's a fairly fast read. It doesn't hurt to read the front of it, but if you really want to just cut to the chase and go to the workshop, it's in the last section of this book. What I find is that if you're starting up a business, the benefit of it is, well, number one, it'll help you get some clarity around the ideas that you've got around your business. And importantly, it'll help you stress test those ideas, because every business is based on assumptions. And we just want to know whether those assumptions are valid. So it's a really good thing to actually think about, okay, when you're asking the questions and answering those, when you're answering the questions that are in the workshop, it's good to record those answers and then listen back to them. And from there, you'll hear, how does that relate to that? And what was the idea behind that? And what was the assumptions? It'll surprise you. Most people who do the workshop say they were quite surprised at what came out of it. So that's probably a good starting point for most startups, rather than doing a leadership profile. Leadership profiles are really good for established businesses, but that was what we developed for startups and for entrepreneurs, so they could start stress testing just the ideas behind the business. Okay. A key benefit of that is you get super clear about who do I want to work with and what do I want to sell them, and you're then able to do things like be a lot more targeted in who you go after as customers. Your offer becomes a lot more sharper. You get a lot more clarity about how you want to go to market with those clients. You get a little bit clearer on your financial targets. Those are some good things to lock down. And once you've got that, then I guess it's just that old question of do I lean into this process and focus on who my audience is, get some offers out there and get the sales going. And those are probably the 3 big things.
That's excellent, Andrew. Thank you. I also want to touch on, Andrew, you've written another book, which if I remember correctly, you wrote because you wanted to target it at your daughter. If I remember that correctly?
I do, yeah. Just 1 second, I'll grab the copy so you can have a look at what it looks like. So the book that I wrote was called The Money Chimp, and The Money Chimp was targeted at millennials, the 18 to 28s. And basically the book is about how people manage money, how do millennials manage money. Millennials on average spend 130% of their weekly wage. Okay.
Wow.
And they owe about 8.3 billion in credit card bills. And so this book will teach you how to spend less, save more, and get out of debt faster. Excellent. And that's the idea behind it. So it was written for my daughter, who is in that age group. It really was just to teach her how to manage her money a lot better. What I find is it's more parents of adult children who actually buy the book for their kids to read. But I get emails all the time from people who've read it and said it's a very fast read. It's short chapters, reading age of about maybe a 12-year-old. So it's fairly easy to understand. Okay. But it's stuff that our grandparents were talking about. It's basic bog standard stuff that works really well. Yeah.
No, that's excellent, because I know a lot of people, that I'm working with and just in my network as well are, parents, and having that sort of information available can make a
Yeah,
big difference,
yeah,
because,
yeah,
I know when I'm looking at some of the children, I'm thinking, oh my God,
yeah.
how can you spend that? You haven't earned anything.
Yeah, so that's right. So really, businesses, I hate to say it, it's one of those four things that I talked about before. Financial control, you've just got to manage your money really well.
Yeah. One of those things we try not to think about, but is actually absolutely imperative.
Well, ironically, the more you think about it, the less you have to.
Yes. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, we touched on the fact that you have been in the UK for the last 10 years. Have
Yeah.
you found, having come over from Australia, have you found any differences in the way that we approach business and the ways that we work, or the things that we could learn from the Australian approach, or vice versa?
I actually think when I came here, I don't know about you, but when I came here, I actually found it. I thought, how hard could this be? We all speak English, right?
Yes.
But culturally, I didn't bank on the fact that in Australia and America, for example, the way it works, as I've understood it, is buy something from me and I'll be your friend. And in the UK, it's be my friend and I might buy something from you. And it's very relational in the way people do business. So there's a lot more. It's a lot more relational in the way that you get to know somebody, and that means, which is, I think, it dovetails very nicely with relational marketing. I think the Brits really get relationships, but they, for some reason, they import speakers like myself to come in and teach them about how to do relational marketing, for example. But I have just found that when you actually focus on delivering value to people and you really work that carefully, the Brits become they become great advocates for what you're doing, and you'll find that you get a lot of referrals. So that's something I think Brits need to sort of probably focus on a little bit more. That it's to sort of like build referral marketing into what they're doing as well. But look, for somebody starting up, I think you've got to demonstrate value. It's to go out and talk to a lot of people, and if I do a Facebook thing, I'll get all the customers I want. And it doesn't work like that. It's the old-fashioned thing: go out and meet people, go out and meet the people you want to do business with. It's a very relational market right now, so it's you've really got to go out and do things like go out and meet people. I believe that's why networking's good.
It's quite interesting how in a lot of ways we've gone to this very remote approach in terms of, we've all got our devices and we can talk without ever actually meeting anybody. And yet to actually get that business, to get things, we have to step back out and be out there meeting them and getting to know them face to face. And it's almost a contradiction in terms of where the technology has taken us to going back to face to face, which was just the norm however many years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, you got to think it's only 13 short years ago that what did we do before social media, hey?
Well, and without having a phone and the feeling that now we have to, we're so attached to everything that you've got to answer the phone right away. And if you're not instantly accessible, there's a problem. And yet,
That's right.
Of course, that was never the case.
No. So, but I believe the Little Black Book is back, and I believe that it was what we used to do pre-2004 was we just targeted. We just thought about who we want to do business with a lot more clearly. So that's one of those steps. Who exactly do you want to do business with? That's why we have the who's your target client. And I was at a breakfast meeting this morning where people say. They get up and stand, how good lead for me is, and they use the word people. I want people to come in. No, you don't want everyone. It's when I get up and introduce myself, I say I work with managing directors. So the managing directors in the room came up and saw me afterwards.
Yeah, because specifically, and that they're identifying with that. That's who I am, as opposed to right. any person whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's really great, Andrew. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to touch a little bit on, I guess, the personal life. One of the things that's, key and really up in front in terms of news and people's awareness at the moment is the mental well-being and the need to make sure that we're not pushing to burnout and all of those types of things, which it's always been the case, but we're much more aware of it now. And I just wondered, I know that you've got the lovely Cocker Spaniels who are currently locked out of the room. But what do you do to make sure that you do maintain that balance?
Well, I honestly think there's a number of things that I do particularly, and this isn't advice for everyone else, but it works for me. I drink a lot of water for a start off. Okay. The brain is a battery. It runs on fresh water. It doesn't run on tea and coffee and alcohol. It doesn't work well with those things. So just pure water, believe it or not, makes your brain work a lot faster or a lot better, put it that way. Fresh water particularly. So I drink. A lot of people I meet, believe it or not, are dehydrated, and they confuse. When the body is dehydrated, it jumbles up your signals and thinks I've got to eat something instead I've got to drink water for it. And when you're hydrated, you actually don't get food signals, you get water signals, right? So a lot of people I meet are dehydrated. They're trying to run, and all your systems rely on really good communication from the brain to the other parts of the body. Water's the delivery vehicle for that. So there's water. I eat a good diet. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I rest. I don't work all hours God sends me. There's a start time and a stop time. And a lot of small business people will just actually, they go find work, they deliver the work, and then they administer the work, and they don't leave any time. So, I leave time for that. So there's the water. There's definitely a good diet. There's a sensible approach to the operating hours that I run. Obviously, I walk and I have a health regime, like an exercise regime that I follow just to do that, which is really important. And I take breaks. I take holidays and breaks, and I turn this thing off.
Andrew's holding up his phone.
Yeah, my phone. Yeah, I turn the phone off because we're coming to an age of always on, never off the grid, and you just mentally you don't put anything down,
Yeah, I know. I went down to Cornwall back at the end of January, and it was really nice because I didn't actually consciously choose to turn off my phone. I was just in an area where you couldn't get any reception.
Yes.
And it was just really nice because I realized that I stopped being so dependent on it, and I was just actually watching the world go by and getting much more involved in that, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, exactly. Which is nice, isn't it?
It is.
After a while, you go, oh. So, one of the things I'm going to do, I'm planning next year, is to walk the Camino Trail in northern Spain. And, I think the idea there is people come back from that and say, why am I so addicted to my phone and to stress and stuff like that, It takes you 5.5, 6 weeks to walk to 800 kilometres, and you just changes your way of life and,
So that sounds really, really exciting. So I'll have to get you back on once you've written that to see how things have changed, Andrew.
Yeah. I'll see how we go.
So, well, once again, Andrew, thank you very much. And I will post up the details for people to be able to access your books, as well as just contact you if they're interested.
Yeah, most likely. And they're up on, I would say that the books are on Amazon. They're easy to get hold of. If people are thinking of starting an idea, they've got an idea for a business strategy is a really good place to start. It's a 90-minute session. We just stress test your business, and that's the ideas in your business. Following that format I just shared with you, but it's obviously it's a lot more focused in that 90-minute period. But we tend to find out what's going to work for you, what isn't going to work, and you get that heads up straight away. So yeah, more than happy to help.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
No worries.
You've been listening to Deborah Levitt on Bridging Gaps, the Business Podcast.